Before we begin, just a quick note. This video doesn't use horror footage or jump scares. Instead, I've kept it simple. Just real chilling stories and soft rain sounds in the background. Because sometimes, all it takes is a voice and your own imagination to feel fear. So if you're lying in bed, trying to sleep, just close your eyes, listen, and let the stories unfold. This story was told to me by someone who claims to be a relative of one of the social workers involved in the case. I don't expect you to believe it. Hell, I don't think I'd believe it myself if I hadn't seen the photos. If you're alone, especially late at night, maybe wait until morning. And if you hear whispers while this story plays, don't blame the rain sounds. It started in the summer of 2005, Kaohsiung, Taiwan. A hot, humid June. The kind of suffocating weather that seems to slow down time itself. But for the Wu family, time didn't slow. It unraveled. The family of 6 had always been known in their apartment complex as religious, but not in the Sunday Mass incense lighting kind of way. No, they had a separate room in their home, locked, always, with talismans pasted all over the door, paper-thin mirrors, and dried bundles of something that might have once been herbs. You could smell that room from outside their unit, a strong mix of old incense, mildew, and something metallic, like blood. It was the youngest daughter, Lin Shu, only 17, who first told her classmates that something was inside her. At first, no one took her seriously. Teenage drama, attention-seeking. But then she showed up with burn marks on her arms, small circular ones, as if she had been pressing lit incense sticks into her skin. She told her teacher that the burns were blessings. "I'm being made clean," she whispered. Her teacher filed a report. But when social workers arrived at the apartment, the family didn't open the door. Not until 3 days later. That's when someone, likely a neighbor, called the police after hearing continuous chanting, rhythmic thuds, and screaming. When they finally forced entry, what they saw didn't make the news. The public was told it was a case of extreme religious delusion, but the raw reports, they're the kind of thing that sticks with you. The apartment was a nightmare. Every mirror had been broken and replaced with reflective paper, some pieces smeared with what tested later as human blood. The walls were covered in scrawled symbols, some drawn in ink, others carved in, symbols no scholar could fully identify, though some resembled ancient Taoist wardings, and others looked like Japanese Shinto markings, a true hybrid of beliefs. Like someone had taken dozens of traditions and mashed them into one fevered ideology. In the center of the apartment, on the floor, an altar, a crude one. 3 bowls, each filled with something different. The first was water blackened with ash. The second, pieces of bone, animal or human, it was never confirmed. The third was feces, mixed with shredded talismans. There was no electricity in the home, no working lights, just candles placed strategically throughout the rooms, casting uneven shadows. The Wu family had been living in the dark. They found the eldest daughter, Wu Fengjuan, unconscious, gaunt, her skin clinging to bone, lying next to the altar. She was whispering the name Guanyin over and over, her eyes open but unfocused. Her body was covered in self-inflicted cuts, some of them old, others still oozing. It would be another 2 days before she died, from what the autopsy listed as organ failure due to starvation, infection, and extreme trauma. The rest of the family, they claimed she had been possessed, that they were trying to save her, that they had seen the spirit of Neja enter her body, that Guanyin had spoken through her in tongues. When the police questioned Lin Shu, she laughed. Not hysterically, but as if she knew something. "We were chosen," she said. "You can't stop what's already begun." One of the officers who processed the scene quit 3 days later. No one knows what he saw. He didn't tell anyone, not even his wife. The house at the edge of the Wu family village was strange from the outside, but inside it was a different world entirely. While the walls of their modest Kaohsiung home were built from concrete, the beliefs held within were made of something far older and far more dangerous. What began as mere reverence to ancient deities soon mutated into something horrifying, something alive. It was the youngest daughter, Wu Shuqin, just 17 at the time, who first claimed to see the presence. According to her journal, later recovered from the house, pages smeared with talismanic ink and blood, she had begun having dreams where a woman in black robes, face hidden by a veil, stood at the end of her bed each night. At first, the figure did nothing, just watched. But slowly, it began speaking in a tongue Shuqin said she did not understand, yet felt in her bones. By the 3rd week, Shuqin had completely stopped sleeping in her room. She slept on the floor of the family shrine, surrounded by burning incense and paper offerings, whispering to the statues of Guanyin and Neijia with shaking lips. Her parents didn't see this as a cry for help. They saw it as divine contact, a sign that their bloodline had been chosen. It wasn't long before the rest of the family began to experience similar signs. Her older brother claimed he saw the kitchen knives floating. Her aunt swore that a hand reached through the bathroom mirror. Her father, Mr. Wu, who had been a mild-mannered retired schoolteacher, suddenly started fasting and meditating for 12 hours a day, convinced that if he reached the right state of mind, the gods would reveal their plan. And they did, just not in the way anyone could have predicted. The family became obsessed with a forbidden ritual they found in a decades-old folk religion manuscript, hidden behind the statue of a Taoist protector deity at their local temple. The ritual was said to be used by the truly faithful to open a third eye and see the true world behind the illusion. It involved chanting incantations at midnight for 49 nights straight, smearing the body with ash and blood, and denying all impure food, only consuming water boiled with talismans and herbs. And they followed it to the letter. They closed off the house. The neighbors reported that they hadn't seen the family come out for days. The windows were covered with red paper. Inside, dozens of hand-painted talismans hung from string, swaying from the ceiling like grotesque wind chimes. They scrawled sacred sigils on the floors, the walls, even the mirrors. Anything that reflected had to be sealed. "She watches from reflections," Shuqin had told her brother one night. She never clarified who she was. By the 3rd week of the ritual, the family had lost weight, visibly. Skin stretched thin, lips cracked, their clothes hung off their bones. But they believed they were ascending, that the weakness they were feeling wasn't starvation. It was the soul shedding the body. They became afraid of sunlight. The house turned cold and dark. Lanterns glowed red in every room. One day, Mr. Wu smashed all the clocks. Time, he declared, was a human illusion. And then things started to rot. Fruits left in offering bowls decayed within hours. Mold grew on the walls in symbols that mirrored the talismans. The water with the talismans, once clear, turned a dull green. But they drank it still, believing it was the nectar of the divine realm. It was Shuqin who first began to physically break. One night, she tore off her clothes and screamed that there were ants crawling under her skin. When her mother tried to calm her, she bit her. They had to tie her to the shrine pillar, but even then, she kept chanting, sometimes in her own voice, sometimes in something else's. Recordings found later by investigators captured her voice dropping several octaves during the chants. Her brother, terrified, kept whispering in the background, "She's not her anymore." And yet the family continued, not out of faith anymore, out of fear. They believed that if they stopped the ritual now, they would be consumed by the very gods they had awakened. They didn't realize they already were. The Wu home had now become unrecognizable, even to the family living in it. No longer a place of warmth or memories, the rooms felt hollow, saturated with fear. The scent of mold, incense, rotting food, and stale blood lingered like a permanent fog. And yet no one left. No one opened the windows. No one dared look into a mirror. Outside, villagers had begun whispering. They spoke of strange chanting that could be heard deep into the night. A delivery man who came by with groceries claimed he heard something knocking from inside the walls. The groceries were never collected. By week 5, no one from the Wu household was seen at all. And inside, something had taken root. Xuqin's condition worsened. Her skin was covered in burn marks, most from hot incense she had willingly pressed into her flesh. She claimed the pain was a purification. Her voice had become permanently hoarse, as if she'd been screaming non-stop for days. Her eyes never focused, always darting to empty corners. "They're watching," she'd whisper. "They're not happy. We broke the rules." She wouldn't eat anything except water steeped with burnt talismans. Her hair had begun falling out in clumps. She slept only in short bursts, always with her back against the shrine, muttering phrases over and over, some in broken Mandarin, others in no known language. Her brother, Lin, began documenting what was happening. He filled 3 notebooks with drawings, charcoal sketches of twisting limbs, hollow-eyed women, creatures with faces like melted porcelain. He scrawled words like "do not stop" and "it's not a god, it's a cage" across entire pages. In the final notebook, a recurring figure appeared, a faceless woman, thin and hunched, crawling upside down across walls. That same week, the family's elderly grandmother stopped speaking entirely. She just sat in her rocking chair near the window, facing a wall, gently tapping her fingers in a pattern that no one could decipher. They later realized it matched the cadence of the chanting Xuqin had been doing, but reversed. It was the 6th week when the hallucinations spread. Mr. Wu claimed that he saw his wife's face shift in the dark, elongating, flickering like a dying candle. He swore he could hear someone breathing behind every door he opened. But when he checked, nothing was there, or so he hoped. His wife, in turn, confessed she began seeing dozens of eyes blinking at her from the wood grain of the bedroom ceiling. She began refusing to sleep, convinced that something would crawl inside her dreams and use her to speak. No one outside knew. No one inside dared ask for help. And then came the fire, not the physical kind, but a spiritual one. That's what they called it. One night, they all heard Xuqin scream louder than ever before. When they rushed into the shrine room, she was on the ground convulsing. Around her, the candles had gone out, yet the room was glowing red, not flickering, glowing. She opened her mouth to scream, but what came out wasn't a voice. It was a sound, a low-frequency hum that rattled the walls, made the windows quiver. She pointed to the mirror that had been covered for weeks, and now lay shattered on the floor. The pieces had cut her. Blood dripped down her arm as she whispered, "She's free." What followed was chaos. Every talisman in the house fell from its place at once. The lights began to flicker. Doors opened by themselves, then slammed shut. For hours, the family huddled in the living room, too afraid to speak, eat, or even pray. The grandmother rocked faster. Lin refused to look up from his notebook. Mr. Wu, once the most faithful, cried quietly in the corner, whispering the names of gods who no longer answered. The next morning, Shuqin was gone. The front door was wide open. Rain poured outside, and all that remained on the shrine was a single phrase scrawled in blood. You broke the chain. Now we are many. The police were never called, not immediately anyway. By the time a concerned neighbor reported the smell coming from the Wu residence, it had been 3 days since Shuqin vanished. 3 long days where the family pretended everything was fine. 3 days where they locked the front door again. But not the shrine room. When the authorities finally entered the house, they found the entire family kneeling in that same room. The parents, the brother Lin, and the grandmother. All of them were pale, silent, eyes open but glassy, staring at the center of the floor. They didn't blink. They didn't speak. And when officers touched them, each recoiled as if their skin had been shocked. Mr. Wu bit his own tongue hard enough to bleed. Lin began shaking violently, whispering, "She's not gone. She's underneath us." And the grandmother, she smiled. A long, vacant, wrong kind of smile. The smell in the house was unbearable. Decay, mold, incense, something metallic, something ancient. The only part of the home that appeared lived in was the shrine room. It was alive with carvings, symbols scratched into the floors, walls, and even the ceiling. The mirror shards had been arranged into a spiral with burnt hair woven between them. Police collected several items: burnt paper talismans, jars filled with yellowish liquid, dolls with missing eyes, and most disturbingly, a recording device still running. It had recorded over 76 hours of audio. Most of it was static, but buried in the hum were distant voices. Some were prayers, some were arguments, and some, according to audio analysis, were voices speaking back. Low mechanical voices that didn't match anyone in the home. One voice was isolated and translated. It repeated the same thing across 3 different nights. The offering is incomplete. Another must open the door. Investigators were baffled. The house showed no signs of forced entry, no blood trail from Shuqin, and no evidence of a break-in. But every member of the family refused to answer questions. Lin eventually broke his silence, only to warn, "If we tell, she'll take the rest of us." When asked who she was, he simply said, "The mother below." The media got wind of the story. The Wu house became a local legend, Kaohsiung's cursed shrine house. Reporters camped outside, but none were allowed in. Those who tried climbing the walls or sneaking into the yard complained of nausea, sudden nosebleeds, or vivid nightmares for days after. Meanwhile, psychological experts diagnosed the family with shared delusional disorder, folia familie, a rare syndrome where an entire group shares the same hallucinations and beliefs. But even skeptics found the level of detail in the family's behavior deeply unsettling. For example, all 5 surviving members would go silent whenever a clock hit 3:33 a.m. As if on cue, they'd stop mid-sentence and bow their heads. Another example, every mirror in the house was smashed. Even reflective surfaces like the microwave door or glass cabinets had been taped over or painted black. When asked why, Mrs. Wu muttered, "She sees through reflections. She waits in the shine." And the most chilling detail of all, under the floorboards of the shrine room, police discovered a small space, barely the size of a crawl space, containing a decaying straw mat, a chipped bowl, and claw marks on the wood. Claw marks from the inside. The claw marks weren't animalistic. They were narrow, human-sized, too small for an adult, but too deliberate for a child. Over 200 individual scratches, layered, etched deep, spiraled into a single point on the wood. At the center of that spiral, something had been drawn, a symbol unknown to modern religious catalogues, resembling a twisted eye with 7 spokes. They sent the drawing to local historians, spiritualists, and even international occult researchers. Only one replied, a Taiwanese shaman who'd been tracking urban legends related to the Mother Below. His message: "You're too late. If the spiral was opened, then the offering has already begun. That family was a gate, not victims." The shaman's words disturbed even the lead investigator, a man who had once dismissed every ghost story he ever heard in 20 years on the force. But when he visited the Wu residence a second time, this time with a forensic team, he made a quiet decision never to step back in, because something had changed. The house was cold, not just cold in temperature, but cold in a way that seeped into the lungs and slowed the heartbeat. The forensic pathologist complained that their equipment began malfunctioning the moment they crossed the threshold. Batteries died, cameras glitched, audio came back corrupted with clicking sounds, and then the lights went out. All of them, at once. They weren't using the home's power either. The team had brought portable halogens with backup batteries. Every light source failed simultaneously, plunging the house into absolute blackness. But the clicking didn't stop. According to the official report, 5 people were in the house when it happened. 4 of them made it out within 90 seconds. The 5th, a junior analyst, froze at the top of the stairs. She claimed she saw someone looking back at her from the wall, not through a window, from the wall itself. When she was pulled out by her supervisor, her pupils were dilated and unresponsive. It took her several hours to form sentences again. Her first words: "She's still watching, through me." She was placed under psychiatric supervision for observation, but days later, she escaped from the facility. Her shoes were found near a canal, but her body never was. Meanwhile, the Wu family was relocated to a psychiatric hospital for long-term care. They were no longer responsive to verbal communication, only reacting to changes in moonlight and time of day. All 5 of them would press their heads to the wall at 3:33 a.m. every night, without fail. Even when restrained, they would thrash until they could make contact with some surface. Nurses described the sound as like moths trapped in glass jars. Software erratic, frantic, but the story didn't end there. 6 months after the case closed, something strange happened. Multiple social media posts began circulating in Taiwanese horror forums, all from anonymous accounts. Each featured grainy screenshots of symbols, the same spiral eye with 7 spokes, scribbled on bathroom mirrors, drawn on fogged car windows, scratched into school desks. A few users joked it was a marketing stunt from a new horror movie, until one post stood out. A short, 12-second video uploaded by a user named @MotherReturn7. No description. Just footage of a young woman staring into her phone camera, whispering, "You opened it, didn't you?" And then, silence. But if you slowed the audio to 20% speed, you could hear something underneath her whisper. A voice, guttural, like it was underwater. "Pass it on." The video was deleted hours later. The account? Gone. But copies circulated, and hundreds of users claimed that after watching it, they heard scratching at their windows that night. inside. Several Reddit threads, Discord servers, and even YouTube reaction videos attempted to recreate the incident. But the people who took it seriously, who really tried to trace the origins, reported the same thing. Every lead ended in Kaohsiung. Every symbol traced back to the Wu house. One horror vlogger, known for investigating urban legends, claimed he'd found archived court documents mentioning a sixth shrine room, one that the authorities never disclosed publicly. He never released the follow-up video. His final post was a live stream titled "The Gate is Not Closed." In it, he simply stares into the camera, breathing heavily, holding up a mirror. His eyes are red. The lights flicker behind him. And just before the stream cuts out, a shape appears behind him. Not a person, a shape. Elongated, slender, with too many fingers. Some still claim it was special effects. Others say it was real. But the stream was pulled down within hours for violating platform guidelines. The final comment on the thread: "The mother below does not want believers. She wants mirrors." Weeks turned into months, and the story of the Wu family slowly faded from news cycles. The psychiatric reports were sealed, and journalists were warned not to investigate further. A few tried and quit. One reporter wrote a column for an independent horror magazine titled, "I heard her voice through the static." It was his last publication before he checked himself into a psychiatric clinic. The issue sold out in days. In the article, he claimed that during his investigation, he uncovered something far more disturbing than religious delusion or folklore gone wrong. He described making contact with a surviving cousin of the Wu family, a quiet woman who'd long been estranged and refused to be named publicly. She lived alone in a remote mountain village, off-grid, surrounded by talismans and small stone altars. She warned him not to dig too deep, but curiosity got the better of him. She handed him a cassette tape, wrapped in faded red paper, bound with what looked like animal sinew. She told him it was a prayer to keep the spiral closed. The reporter went home and listened to it. He described the audio as unbearable. Low, rhythmic chanting layered with insect-like clicks, whispering in reverse. A woman's voice, calm and deliberate, speaking in an old Taiwanese dialect, began repeating one phrase over and over. "Mother is watching through your eyes." At precisely the 4-minute mark, he claimed the walls of his apartment started clicking. First softly, like water droplets, then louder, faster, like bones tapping drywall. And then, silence. He tried to remove his headphones, but found he couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't blink. His reflection in the black monitor smiled back at him. Before he did, he passed out and woke up the next morning with blood on his shirt and symbols scratched into the back of his bathroom mirror. Not with a pen, with fingernails. He lived alone. That's when he booked himself into the clinic. The clinic later burned down in an electrical fire. 8 patients unaccounted for. Meanwhile, across Taiwan and even into other countries, urban legends began to rise. Stories of strangers receiving anonymous packages. Inside, spirals drawn in ash. No return address, no fingerprints. People began having the same dream. A woman in red standing at the edge of their bed, mouthing words they couldn't hear. And when they awoke, blood dripped from their nose. The symbol became banned in some online forums. Several subreddit mods blacklisted any posts referencing Mother Below or the spiral because of strange behavioral changes in users. One thread was removed after dozens of commenters claimed they saw their screen blinking back at them. But it wasn't just online. In schools, children were caught drawing spirals during class. Teachers reported that some students sat silently for entire periods, only muttering one phrase over and over. "She's almost here." Several of them had never heard of the Wu case, but when shown images of the talismans from the original shrine, they burst into tears or started convulsing. Police were called. No drugs, no trauma. Just one bizarre common detail. Each child had recently stared at themselves in the mirror during a thunderstorm, and somewhere, buried in a lost corner of the web, an AI-generated image surfaced. One that no user claimed to have created. A dark silhouette, thin, head tilted too far sideways. The caption underneath in glitched, broken text read, "You invited her by listening." Investigators later traced the image's upload location. It was a closed psychiatric ward. Room 5C, Wu Fengjuan's room. But she died over a year before. Or at least, that's what they thought. Security footage for that day is corrupted. Cameras went black at 3:33 a.m., and in the one frame that did survive, a nurse is seen standing in front of the door. She's not facing it. She's facing the wall, smiling. A month after the corrupted image surfaced, strange incidents began spreading beyond Taiwan. Small, disconnected cases at first, but they shared an eerily similar thread. Spirals drawn in dust, reflections that didn't match, and people reporting hearing prayers in languages they didn't know. It was subtle at first. A college student in Oregon uploaded a TikTok claiming that her apartment's fire alarm went off every night at exactly 3:33 a.m. No smoke, no malfunction, and no wiring issue the landlord could find. The most disturbing part? Her cat would hiss at the hallway corner every night, just before the alarm rang. She made a joke about it in one of her videos, captioning it, "Must be the Wu demon again, LOL." That video was the last thing she ever posted. Her roommate found her 2 days later, lying on her bed, eyes wide open, not blinking, not moving, completely catatonic, her fingernails chewed down to the quick. The police noted that on the mirror above her dresser, someone had drawn a spiral from the inside of the glass. She lived alone. A few days later, in a quiet suburb of Tokyo, an entire family was found unconscious in their home. Not dead, just non-responsive. Investigators described the house as being in pristine condition, except for one unsettling detail. In the living room, every photo frame was turned inward, and on the back of each was scribbled in black ink, "Mother is inside the walls now." No one could determine who wrote it. The family's 6-year-old daughter was the first to recover. When asked what happened, she whispered, "She didn't like the TV. It was too loud. She wanted us quiet." That same day, 5 different forum users across 3 continents posted identical messages on paranormal subreddits, all at the exact same minute. "I didn't invite her, but she came anyway." None of the accounts had any connection. Their IPs came from Brazil, Norway, Singapore, Australia, and rural Texas. Each account went dark after the post. When a few brave internet sleuths dug into the Wu family's history even deeper, they found something that hadn't been widely reported. A page from the police file that had supposedly been redacted. A crudely drawn diagram that looked like a shrine, with a spiral at the center and symbols branching off like veins. Around it, handwritten in Mandarin, were phrases like, "Feed only during silence." "Do not stare back at her. She answers if you call without words." At the bottom, in red pen, the spiral opens when enough people remember. It began to dawn on some of the more seasoned researchers that this wasn't just a family tragedy or an urban legend gone viral. It was a viral curse. a mimetic infection, one that didn't need belief to spread, just attention. Every new post, every video, every whisper about the case might be another key to unlocking the spiral again. And the more people knew, the closer it got. One horror podcaster, desperate for clout, made an entire hour-long episode detailing the Wu case and mocking the so-called curse. That night, he live-streamed a debunk session. At the 45-minute mark, while reading from an online translation of the talisman prayers, the audio glitched. His voice looped. He froze mid-sentence. Then, barely audible over the static, his co-host whispered, "Your mirror's smiling." The stream cut out. The channel was deleted the next day. No one has heard from either host since. Reddit banned a dozen threads on the topic. TikTok blacklisted hashtags. Still, people whispered. A new phrase began appearing, not in speech, but in thoughts. Readers swore they could feel it, even if they never spoke it out loud. A sentence burned into memory. "She's behind your eyes now." And then came the disappearances. A woman in Berlin walked into a subway tunnel and never came out. A student in New Delhi was seen speaking to someone in an empty classroom. A security guard in Queens was found frozen mid-step in a museum hallway, staring at a spiral scratched into the marble floor. What the Wu family unleashed was no longer local. The spiral had gone global. It didn't need an altar anymore. It had the internet. And in every glitch, every mirror, every quiet hallway at 3:33 a.m., she waits. Shall I continue to page 8? The final page? True. Scary horror stories to fall asleep. To cruise. Real creepy rain sounds and bedtime night terrors. Page 8. The spiral is listening. You might be wondering, how does this end? That's the problem. It doesn't. The spiral doesn't need a resolution. It only needs attention, curiosity, and most of all, silence. The more people talk about the Wu family case, the more distorted it becomes. Details warp, locations shift, but one thing always stays the same. The symbol, the spiral. It always comes back. You've probably seen it by now. Maybe in a thumbnail, maybe in an image burned into your head. Maybe you even imagined it while listening to this story. If so, you've already opened the door a little. That's how it starts. In a remote village outside Kaohsiung, the same region where the Wu family lived, a local monk went missing last year. Before vanishing, he had written one final message in chalk on the temple floor. Just 4 characters, translated roughly as, "She speaks through thoughts." The chalk circle he drew was found smudged, as if something had crawled across it. At the same time, halfway across the world, a nurse in a psychiatric hospital in Montreal filed a report about a patient who hadn't spoken in weeks. The woman sat in her room, eyes closed, whispering the same phrase over and over. "Don't look at the spiral. She hates that." The patient's file said she had no knowledge of Taiwan, no known internet access, no exposure to the case. But the phrase she was repeating, it matched exactly a line written in the private prayer diary recovered from the Wu family home. A line that was never released to the public. The spiral isn't just in stories anymore. It's in shared ideas, unconscious recognition, memes in the oldest, most terrifying sense of the word. It spreads through understanding, and you understand it now. There's a theory now, whispered in fringe forums and barely kept up blogs, that the Wu family was only the first drop of rain in a much larger storm, that the spirals they saw weren't hallucinations or psychological symbols, but signposts, warnings, markers of her territory. Some call her by names borrowed from Taoist texts or folk religion. A rogue spirit, an ancient goddess, an entity that feeds not on flesh, but on focus. Others think she's older than language, a force that waits in the periphery of thought, only becoming real once she's known. One final story, shared anonymously on a now deleted subreddit. A man wakes up in the middle of the night, cold sweat on his neck, feeling watched. He turns over in bed and sees, just for a moment, a woman smiling in the dark corner of his room. Upside down, her face twisted in a grin that didn't belong to a human being. He doesn't scream. He doesn't move. She whispers, "I like it when they listen." And then she's gone. The next morning, he finds a spiral drawn into the frost on his window. From the inside, he never posts again. So if you're hearing this now, if you made it all the way through, be careful tonight. Don't replay the story. Don't talk about it with friends. And whatever you do, if you see something odd in your mirror or catch a glimpse of something just barely visible at the corner of your eye, don't look directly at it. That's how she knows you believe. And once she knows, well, then she's already behind your thoughts. By the way, this wasn't just a story. The events you heard tonight are inspired by the real-life Wu family case from 2005 in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. The same case that inspired the film Incantation. Everything from the shared delusions, the symbols, to the tragic ending actually happened. Sometimes reality is far more terrifying than fiction. That's it for tonight. I upload new scary stories every single night, always with soft rain in the background and no jump scares. So if you're someone who likes falling asleep to horror, consider subscribing. And if you're already part of this little community, thank you for being here. Sleep well.